Like every time I couldn't find a way to make myself happy somewhere, I was like, man, this is going to look horrible on my resume. People are going to judge me. They're going to think I'm always trying to leave. But one of the things he used to tell me all the time is, Grace, you have to learn. Where he had this one quote he always said. It was like, it's better to learn no lesson than to learn the wrong lesson. Throughout my career, I was always very insecure about, was I doing a good enough job? Did people like me at work? That was a hilarious, oddly impossible task I had given myself, make sure everybody liked me. Yeah, so I believe my first attempt to go out on my own, like I said, I panicked, and I know that there isn't an amount of money in the world that could bring my family back.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Making Your Mark podcast. I'm your host, Mark Bundang, and today, as usual, I have a very special guest. Her name is Grace Anniskett. Hi, Grace. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good. You know what? We were talking a bit earlier, and I guess you're an avid walker, is that right? Or you like to walk a lot?
Yeah, I love walking, hiking in the woods. Did about 4 miles this morning and then followed by another 2-mile walk after that.
Goodness. And that's like every day, right?
Yeah, every day.
You are an example to all of us. Good. So a little bit about how I know Grace. I gave a PMI webinar in 2022. I think you watched it. You dropped some nice lines through LinkedIn for me, which I really appreciated. Enough for me to kind of say, who is this? And so I kind of kept tabs a little bit about where you were going and where you ended up. Suffice to say, I think over the last 5 years, there's been quite an adventure just in the last 5 years alone for you.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited for the audience to kind of see that and hear a little bit about your evolution. I think it's an amazing story, and I think people can learn from it. So without further ado, Grace, if you can, would you be able to tell them a little bit about your background and where you feel you've made your mark?
Yeah, of course. So as mentioned, I kind of have a real wild backstory. Born and raised in rural Alaska, then moved down to the lower 48 and wasn't the best student. Didn't do super great in high school, thought I wouldn't even go to college. Eventually I did go, thankfully. And directly after college graduation occurred, we had a big job conference kind of seminar, and they explained what project management was to us. And I went home immediately and was like, I'm going to be a project manager. I definitely did not understand how long that would take at the time. It took a very long time, but I'm really happy to be a project manager now. And I know that sounds like insane, but I think being a project manager is a lot more fun than people realize because there's so much diversity to every single thing that you do every day. And you kind of don't know, but you also know exactly what's coming every day. So I enjoy it a lot.
I want to go back a little bit to that moment where you realized you wanted to be a project manager. Is there a particular quality or aspect of it that really attracted you in the beginning?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I wasn't super great in high school is I would get bored very often. And in college, they actually let me make my own degree program and kind of design it myself. And when they explained project management to me, it was a little similar in the sense that you do something different all the time. Like you use a standard framework so you're not floundering around lost, but at the same time you get to try something new every time you try a new project. And it also explained the diversity you can reach in the industry you're in, and that project managers exist all over the world through manufacturing, construction, anything you really could imagine, obviously software. And so I really love the idea that maybe the first 5 years of me being a project manager, I'm in one industry, and then maybe the next 5 years I'm in another industry. And that sounded really exciting to me. Not that I wanted to hop around too much, but I wanted the chance to keep things interesting all the time.
That is interesting that you want to keep things interesting because a lot of people find that, like if you stay in one place and you just keep going, they find comfort in that. Like they like routine. They like to, I guess, have predictability to a certain degree. For you, it seems that there's a balance between that and maybe adventure, like discovery and things like that. Have you always been curious, or is that an aspect of your character?
Yeah, at work in my first 5 years, my favorite thing to tell people is curiosity killed the Grace cat, because I am a very curious person. I like to ask a lot of questions. I usually try to stay pretty sensitive to when I've gotten overwhelming for people though with my questions. And so it's kind of nice getting to be a project manager because people are expecting you to ask a lot of questions. So yeah, I always have a curiosity. Even just today on my hike, we saw a bunch of birds and we were all debating, are they starlings? Are they sparrows? Like, which one is it? And of course, I had to do like a lot of research to figure out which one it was. So I couldn't even like just go on a hike today without asking questions.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I love curiosity, and it's part of the reason why I do this podcast. I really took an interest when we were meeting beforehand in where you came from. From what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, like it wasn't a straight leap from high school to college, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you had gone through some life experience that brought you there. Can you tell the audience a little bit about
Yeah, so my family isn't particularly like the most affluent. There's a decent amount of education in the family, but people kind of just like to stay in their hometown and live their life very regular. And I, of course, decided to be very different than everybody else in my
that?
family. And at first, I thought in college, or actually in high school, because I had to get a job fairly young. I was 15 or 16 when I very first started working. In order to balance that work and balance school, I kind of got this idea of like, well, what if I just don't keep going to school? Like, what if after high school I keep waitressing and bartending and maybe I'll be this really amazing fancy bartender with all these tricks. I'm a terrible bartender, so that didn't go super great. And I also had this perception when I was younger that making cash somehow was a higher volume of income because I had skipped all my accounting classes in high school. I thought it was like more money than if I had just gotten like a salary job with benefits. I really didn't comprehend the aspect of like the trade off between just getting instant cash every night from your tips versus going through a career and getting an education and getting experience and exposure and like fine tuning that. I kind of thought work was you just show up every day, you do the same old thing. Why do I need to be amazing at that? You can actually also be amazing at waitressing. And again, I really was not one of those fantabulous ones because I would ask too many questions while I'm hanging out at a table. And so I realized pretty quickly this isn't going to be how I make enough money to sustain a good lifestyle for me and my family. And so I decided to try and go get into college since I was so bad in high school. Not too many colleges were really super interested in what I was me wanting to get an education. There was one program though that my grandma found from her alma mater, and it was the Hillier College program at University of Hartford. And it kind of specialized in supporting those students who seemed to have like this hidden maybe talent and passion that just needed to be pulled out from an academic structure perspective. And so you spend the first 2 years of your 4 year degree kind of with a ride along academic person to help you learn how to take notes, learn how to study. And I realized rapidly that all the times I was bored in high school, it was because I didn't even give it any time whatsoever. And if I had given it some time and learned these skills, I could have really rapidly made it through my grades and moved on to something more interesting. But instead, I was just like, I'm just not doing it at all. And so then in college, I did learn those skills and I was able to learn how to do things I didn't always like and also learn how to do things I really enjoyed. So it was a really great program. After about a year of it though, I was like, man, I'm ready to go do something more exciting. Like now I'm ready. Now I get it. I understand what I was supposed to be doing this whole time. So
You didn't come from a background where, I guess, education was as valued as, say, some other, say, other families or other cultures and stuff like that. So you kind of had to learn along the way. I mean, I know everyone kind of does that, but you've made some of those bigger discoveries as you progressed as well. I wanted to go to your experience that you wanted to share, the first one. I guess it is your first job or close to it. Do you want to go through that?
yeah, there was a lot of jobs in between, but this was like my first real chance at a corporate position. After many years of waitressing, many years of college and deli sandwich making and all types of things that really made me learn to value the idea that I got to go to an office and work on the same general thing every day and there was no crazy people yelling at me. So I really enjoyed my very first job out of like real kind of growing up into adulthood. And I liked it because it was for a project management software company. And in my mind, working for a project management software company is close enough to being a project manager that I have to be able to become a project manager there. I was very wrong and very naive, but that's okay. I learned a lot there and I really did enjoy the job. And I initially started off as just a support desk person who just answered calls from a free trial, like, and anytime somebody had a question on the software, I had to be able to answer it. So I had to train really hard on the product. I had to get used to the weird questions people might ask based on their role. And that was kind of the very beginning of me realizing I can proactively give people advice on the software. Like if they're a project manager, I know what they're interested in. If they're a procurement person trying to solicit for information on the software vendor from a security and how do you manage the organization perspective, I know what their questions are. And so then I slowly kind of got opportunities to ride along with the consultants at the company. And I got to kind of play mini consultant person in the background. Eventually, they let me actually be a consultant after like me really harassing incessantly for that. And I had a really great manager throughout my entire time there. I always really loved all my managers. But eventually, I had this amazing manager who, during my annual performance review, kind of really explained to me between your curiosity, your speed to want to learn new things, and your genuine desire to want to do a good job. Like I've never wanted to do a crappy job and be like, oh, the customer will get over it. I always want to make sure the customer that called got their question answered. And she said, those factors, you're one of the absolute top performers here, and you really need to start asking for raises. I was like, what? Wait a second. So we don't just automatically get raises? I thought I was doing all this great stuff, and I would, like you're telling me I'm great. My performance review is going really well. You're doing nothing but complimenting me. There was like no room for improvement in anything that she mentioned. And so I thought, well, but that's how you get the raise. You just listed all the reasons for me. I don't even have to list them myself. And she was like, no, that's not how it works. The business will still function whether you ask for a raise or not. We have the regular increased cost of living raises, but if you want like a substantial raise to represent what you're putting into this organization, you have to ask for it. You have to learn how to negotiate for it. And she walked me through quite a bit of what does it look like. And then I got a second lesson at that same company right around when I was trying to collect that. I wanted to bring in another software for us to use for the support team to do better. And the CTO told me the same thing. He was like, Grace, you have to figure out a measurable way to say this is why this will make things better for us. And I realized between what my female manager said and what the CTO said, if I can't quantitatively say this is exactly where we're at today and this is where we will be tomorrow if this one thing changes and this is how we'll measure, nobody will ever pay me for the money I deserve, and we will also not get the software that I really want us to use because I don't like doing it manually. And so I really started putting two together, realizing from here on out I have to start learning how to just make that part of like a habitual process, kind of like how in all project management you have these frameworks and processes. You really have to center your entire day-to-day life at work around, and you might not do anything exciting that day. Maybe you just talked to a customer briefly and they were really happy, but you still prevented them from wanting to cancel. So you still technically saved the company money. And so through that line, I went from making a really pathetic amount of money per year to finally graduating more in the range of six digits, which was like my unbelievable dream come true, which at the time I didn't even realize was still not that impressive compared to other consultants in the industry, but I was still excited. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a lot to peel back in there. How long were you in that company?
7 years.
7 years. And then how long were you in that company until you had that conversation, that first one with your boss there?
It was about 2 to 3 years later.
Okay, so you had a good 2 or 3 years where you kind of tried to let the work speak for itself, and then yeah, that's a lesson that all of us learn.
Yeah, I'm like, man, 3 years of raises just right out the window. And I didn't just work really hard at my job. I would come in early, I would leave late. I never spent my whole lunch break gone and away. Help make the coffee, take out the trash. I mean, anything I could get my hands on for extra tasks to try and show value, I was really willing to do it. And for 3 years, I did it with nothing more than maybe a 1 to 2% increase. And I was doing all these different jobs. It was definitely a big lesson learned, and I only had to learn that lesson once. I never again thought that my actions would speak enough that I would just raises would rain down from the skies at me.
Yeah, and this is a great takeaway for our audience because our audience is early to mid-career professionals, people who haven't learned the unspoken rules of the workplace. I can honestly say, having come up as well as being at the management level, I can tell the audience that on the manager side, they're not going to want to spend more money or have more expenses unless they actually have to, until the very end, right? So that's where your responsibility as an employee is, or to yourself, but also to the company, to say, listen, I know the value of my work. I know what kind of contribution I can make, and I think it's worth this much. And right now you're paying me here. I know how I can get to justifying that you can pay me this, because you can vote with either your feet if they don't comply, or you can vote with, like saying, you know what, I'll accept whatever they give me, or you can say like, well, no, let's work together to find what's reasonable for a raise, but also reasonable for the company. Right. So when you approach it that way, it takes time. And I know for myself as well, that was a big, big, big hurdle for me. Like I was a big person on trying to let the work speak for myself as well. I didn't learn it as fast as you did. And I
I
didn't
thank
have the
my
courage.
manager. If my manager hadn't sat me down and said, Grace, nobody's handing it to you, I would have probably kept going for all 7 years.
Well, then you're very lucky. Is this manager of yours? Can you tell a little bit about this manager of yours?
She was really amazing. She still does amazing things out there in the industry. Very pragmatic person and has a very clear, almost like laser beam line of sight to both how strategy functions, kind of what motivates people. She really gets it. And I don't know if she was always like that or if that just evolved over time. Because at the time, I think she was about maybe 12 years older than me. And so it is possible, like, she was just like this after a long time of learning it herself the hard way. She just shared the lessons, but she knew how to share them so that I would listen. She could have gone about it a different way and kind of been really suggestive of like, well, why don't you do this? But she just sat me down and told me exactly what to do. And for that, I'm not only am I extremely thankful for what she did, and I try to continue that whenever I speak to younger people in the workforce, but I also recognize the real skill set she had by being able to learn that lesson at some point in time herself and share it well.
And how did you cultivate this relationship with her?
When I was younger, I used to treat everybody like they were my best friend at work. I would just kind of like show up and I treat people like how I really wanted to be treated in the world. And it had nothing to do with politics or optics of the workplace. I have scaled that back like a small amount. Not too much though, honestly, because I think there's a vulnerability to it that's very important for people to see so that you don't come off as being like very cold. Because I'm really not in any roles where I need to be cold, calloused, and pragmatic or anything like that. Project management, people have to trust you.
Yeah.
People don't trust you if you're like a robot just talking about the project all the time. So I'm still very personable and bubbly when I talk to people, but I also, since very early on in my career, and this is a natural skill set that I just had, I really like to immediately start conversations, usually, other than this podcast, of course, by immediately asking people about them, right? Like if this were any standard conversation, I would have already asked you like 10 questions about you. And so the more you ask people about them and you get to know them, the more they kind of look out for you. I would say is kind of the best way to put it because, right, I still did have her as a manager for quite a while before she told me. So, like, at some point, I won people over with them to see that I was worth putting that attention and effort into.
It comes naturally to you, right? Being inquisitive, being a listener, being genuinely interested in the other person.
Yeah.
Okay. That's well, like if you're not that type, it's harder. You have to work at it. But I guess you leaned in on one of your natural skills, which is great. And that person, I'm assuming, at that time was, I guess, conducive to mentoring, coaching, all those kind of things, predisposed to it at that.
Yeah, I think the first couple of years, probably one of the main reasons she maybe didn't give me the advice sooner was we were still at such a intense startup level. Everybody was working so many hours, and I think nobody really had the time and space to like breathe or even think about what does the next 5 years of this company look like if we don't talk to our younger workforce about this kind of stuff. And it was not too long after that that I got a whole like flock of really young interns to come in and kind of work with me and kind of learn how I grew in the company. And so we were just on the cusp of starting to work on our growth and how do we get the people who work here to start having a larger set of skills so that we can grow without having to necessarily hire like a lot of new people.
Okay. Early on in your career, or in that job, you were already kind of helping the next generation or the incoming. That's very commendable. Quite kind. Part of what I wanted to kind of hammer home for the audience here as well is so you out of the 7 years that you were there, it took 2 or 3 years to get to that point where you had that conversation. How long did it take to get to that level of six figures for you?
Yeah, not very long at all. So I'm one of those people where somebody gives me advice or kind of a new framework to test out, I'll kind of instantly apply it. And that is another thing that comes naturally to me because I always like maybe it's impatience actually and not as exciting or amazing as I think it is in my head, but I just want to get started right away. And so I immediately went back to work and set up like, here's the next 30, 60, 90 days. And then here's how I'm going to measure it quarterly and annually. And I had everything so prepped that it just became like quarterly, I always hit my bonuses. And then from there on out, I always got my annual raises. And whenever there was a new position open, I would immediately apply for it in hopes that I could continue to grow the roles that I play. So it didn't, if it was a lateral move, it did not matter to me. If it was a move up, that was great too. But my goal was to try to do as much different work so I could start saying, look at all these things I was able to impact across the organization as quickly as possible. And so I think maybe like 1 year after that is when I started getting substantial raises and bonuses.
Okay. So, in your early part of your career, you place an emphasis or an importance on learning as much as you can across the business as well. That's a very good move. I like to tell some of the younger ones that I take on board on the team when I hire, that I'm not oblivious to the fact that if you're in your early part of your career, the chances of you staying are probably very slim. So I say to them, while you're here, by the time you leave, I would like for you to be better than when you came in. Right. So that's my mission. If you work with me while you're in the company, and when you go and leave, hopefully, I tell them don't take the easy job. I mean, don't take the straight I'm ready to kind of coast job. Take the crazy job, or take something out that's out of left field. If you get a chance, because at that time in your life, you have the bandwidth, you have the energy, you have the sheer brute force of power to be able to learn as quickly as you can and learn as many things as you can before you have to settle, because that's life. You eventually you reach a life stage where you want more stability, predictability, and stuff like that, but not when you're young. You need to get as much as you can. So I can really appreciate that part of the story that you're saying. I wanted to ask you then, you were there for 7 years. What was going on in your mind when you said, what, I think I have to go now? This is the end of it.
Yeah, I had successfully gotten so many role changes and promotions in multiple directions that I actually ended up off in like my own little pod by myself where like I reported directly to a manager, but nobody else worked with me. I was just kind of like this global person that taught everybody, knew about the product, trained new incoming people about things, how to do their job, taught difficult customers how things functioned, saved failing accounts. Like I just kind of did everything for everybody all the time. And at that point, I could see that there was really no further opportunity unless I moved into management. And I had actually decided that I don't like how management has to work, right? They get the same old thing every day. There's nothing new, fun, and exciting. There's no new projects. They have to keep everybody there. And they kind of have to play like emotional punching bag for everybody whenever they're unhappy. Like if management's unhappy with their team's performance and if their team's unhappy with management's new rules, like you're just this person stuck in between all these other people who are never pleased. And I was like, I don't want to go in that direction. Like I had finished all my lateral raises and promotions and I did not want to actually start climbing the ladder upwards. because it just didn't feel like the right place for me. And so this was like my very first attempt at starting my own business. I went out as a 1099er out there in the world, and I offered, my services with that software out there in the world with some of the people who I knew had worked with me in the past, and they did not currently engage with any services with that company. And so this wouldn't be any type of a competitive environment. And so I worked with, I think, 3 or 4 companies right away on a 1099 basis, but I got really scared. And I was like, ooh, this is kind of terrifying. I have no idea how to do invoices. I don't even understand how to really like sell my hours. Like I just kind of showed up and did a full-time person's job but by an hourly rate. Like there was no strategy behind it. And so after like 1 year, one of those customers offered me a full-time job and I took it because I was just so freaked out about like I just didn't know what to expect next. I didn't have any ideas of how to expand the business or keep it long term. So I went straight back into working full-time somewhere. And from that point forward, I didn't work anywhere for longer than maybe a year or two. I just kept bouncing around because I could never find my footing again because most places I went to work weren't software based companies. And so they tended to not have as many different options available for different types of jobs within the organization.
Did the job hopping, I guess, or perceived job hopping, did that hurt you in any way?
Funny enough, nobody ever asked me about it, but I felt a lot of guilt and shame about it. Like every time I couldn't find a way to make myself happy somewhere, I was like, man, this is going to look horrible on my resume. People are going to judge me. They're going to think I'm always trying to leave. I wasn't even trying to do what I was doing. I would just work somewhere and things would just not quite feel right or go right. Like I just either would get really boring really fast and then I was miserable all the time and I tend to finish work really quickly. So if I was done by 3 and I'm just sitting there in an office until 5 p.m. like losing my mind and there was crazy rules sometimes like you can't be listening to music on Spotify on your at your desk like that. It doesn't look professional. And so I felt so cramped and I was like, well, if you gave me stuff to do, I would go do it. But then everybody was so uncomfortable with how much work I was doing. And so it's like, all right, well, I can't leave early. I literally have to sit here until 5. And so, yeah, just places that had really obnoxious rules. I probably would have stayed longer if they could have found a way to work with my personality. But that's the reality is sometimes you're not a good fit for that company. And I did feel crappy about myself for a while, thinking I should change. But I'm glad I didn't because I've now found plenty of different places that work really well with my personality type. And those places still probably would not work well with me. And that's fine. There's so many different people in this world. Like everybody needs to have a place that works well for them. And there's plenty of people who work there that love working there and they're good. So over time, I let go of the idea that this looks bad on me and this is my personal failure just because other people couldn't figure out how to work with me.
Okay, so that's interesting. At that point in your career, how well did you know yourself?
Oh man, not well at all. I was still so I didn't realize what I was up to this whole time, but I used to be really obsessed with making to-do lists and color coding the different types of actions that I had, like whether it be because I always had client lists wherever I worked. And so I would often do like, oh, here's a color coding for a client action follow-up versus an internal one. And I would always sign up for like a lot of internal things to do on top of multiple clients to work with. And so I just kind of always signed up for everything. And I would organize all these notes and all these folders, and I would keep these trackers. And I would do these things where every month end I would have my to-do list. Every end of week I would have my to-do list, like an obsessive, crazy amount of to-do lists. But so that I wouldn't forget all the little things we all have to do because nobody's going to sit around and train you every single month end. And so I would keep all these trackers for like event triggered and recurring kind of regular time durations for lists. And over time, I realized what I was actually formulating was like my own services project management framework for people who manage projects that are in the services industry, that are client facing for like any services company. So if you're working for Salesforce and you've got 15 clients that you're managing their implementation, this is really a framework that I devised for myself over time. But way back when, people always saw me coming into work with a bag full of highlighters and all these notebooks, and I kind of looked a little crazy and I couldn't explain. I had to visualize everything. And so I was throughout my career, I was always very insecure about, was I doing a good enough job? Did people like me at work? That was a hilarious, like oddly impossible task I had given myself, make sure everybody liked me. And am I doing the correct type of work? So for some reason, early in my career, I used to think I had to do work the way they wanted me to do work, rather than the natural frameworks I was designing for myself, which were just as successful as how they wanted me to do things. And so the longer I got in my career, the more I realized my framework works really well for me. It doesn't have to work for other people, and that's totally fine. As long as I do my job and I do a good job at it and I communicate well, I think everybody's fine with it. And they are now. But when I was younger, it was really hard. I kind of just felt like a real weirdo oddball at work all the time.
It's interesting because you mentioned earlier the amount of work that place gave you was a lot, but you still managed to finish it within less than the 8 hours a day that they were asking you to work. Yet they needed you to do the stretch of those remaining hours in the office. And they need to see you not doing the Spotify, not doing the other thing. And you were like, well, what about giving me enough work to fill my day? Okay. So I find that interesting because we are still operating in a time when we think productivity is a number of visible hours that a boss sees you from this time to this time. And I'm guilty of it myself, having been in my last job working with, I guess, younger talent. And I actually had a lesson learned for myself coming from my own experience that I need to rethink how I measure productivity of employees. I need to figure out in 2026 how we can get the most out of employees without the I guess the traditional production worker measuring productivity things that we used to do, right? Like punch cards. Because that kind of reminds me exactly of your thing. You haven't punched your punch card out yet. So why aren't you working? Well, there isn't enough work. It's not a production line.
Exactly. Oh, and I actually was talking to somebody about this the other day because I travel occasionally for work, and I meet up with random people when I go out and travel because it's kind of fun to meet people in real life. And I was talking to somebody about what it's like to travel for work and kind of what it's like to deal with when you have things to do, but at the same time you kind of don't have things to do. And it's like sometimes somebody will ask you to do a list of things, but because, and maybe it's the older generation in me, I don't know what it is, but I will actually try and find ways to do things that I think they want me to do, even when they've not explicitly, because I'm like, how do I fill the rest of my day? And so, one question I often ask for, especially when I run into women who are like, I don't know, I just work so much and I work way past 5 every day. And I'm like, well, who asked you to do that? Because I can almost guarantee you nobody asked you to do that. And I had like the reverse problem when I was younger is nobody ever asked me to do, like, nobody asked me to come in early or leave late. But in my brain, I was like, this is how you show up in a way that shows people you want responsibility and you want to get taken seriously. But nobody explicitly said, this is what would make you look responsible. And I can guarantee you, I could have at any point in time walked into that CTO's office and asked him, hey, do you mind me asking you, like, what would help you perceive me better as a more responsible and like ready to take on more action as a company person rather than just guessing for myself? And I actually implemented the same thing with all my customers today. So when I bring in a new project, I ask the customer, hey, what's your top priority on this project? And you might think that that sounds like a question we should all ask, but a lot of times, for whatever reason, human nature, we tend to talk about a lot of other things, and then we take a bunch of assumptions based off of what they just said. And just because they repeated like this bad thing that happened on their last project 4 times, now we're like, all right, that's all they care about. They care about like fast follow-up, deep engagement because their last vendor didn't answer them enough times. But actually, at the end of the day, the most important thing to them is actually the consistency of the output of the software they're using. And they never cared about the thing that I just made a wild assumption about. And so I now ask people, and it's a little more detailed than like, what's your top priority? But it's like, do you care about seeing this first in the project or do you care about seeing this first in the project? And if both of those things sound like I'm coming from a weird place, now I know I'm really not prepared for whatever it is you think we're about to do on this project. So let's talk about it. And I was not brave enough to do that when I was younger. Maybe it was insecurity. Maybe it was just my generation. I actually have no clue. I've never done a root cause analysis on that one, but I know now I'll never make that same mistake again. I'll just outright ask people or talk to them, and I will genuinely take their word for it. and I'll note it, and then I'll remind them when I feel like they're showing signs that I'm somehow still doing something wrong. I'll say, hey, by the way, remember when you told me that this was the most important thing, and but last week it kind of felt like maybe it wasn't. So could we talk about that? So now I just really talk to people a lot more.
To peel that one back a little bit, because one of the things that people are afraid of when to ask those kind of questions is, I don't want to come across like I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying, or I didn't read whatever email you sent me. How do you ask those questions without looking like you didn't do your homework?
Yeah. I just usually I'll tell people, but before I even do that, I'll really ask myself, like, the last time I really wrote somebody off, why did I write them off? Was it because they showed up to me and asked me one question twice? Or was it because there was like a long series of them being truly inept and incompetent and I got so pissed off that I finally was like, you know what? This isn't working out. And usually it's the latter. It's so rare that somebody asks one or two whoopsie daisy, could you repeat yourself questions? Because I can be genuinely deeply listening to you and still not retain everything you just said sometimes. Like, especially if maybe you use a slightly more elevated vocabulary than I felt prepared to receive, like I might still need to ask you again. And so I'll usually just tell people that, like, especially if they have like a really long answer to a question for me, I'll either try and say it back to them, but that can be a slippery slope because you might accidentally bring a new topic that they didn't plan, and now all of a sudden you've wandered off from where they were headed. So I'll usually try and ask people, like, could you just clarify like a little bit more with less sentences what that last piece was you were trying to get to? Because I'm not sure if I followed all the way. And that sounds more like a, can you help me? Because maybe I'm not, rather than not only blaming them, but distracting them. So just ask a lot of questions.
Okay, okay. And you're not worried about annoying them with so many questions.
And I'll tell people too sometimes. Like if I can sense, like I know if a call's been more than 30 minutes, I'll ask them real quick, like, hey, how are you doing on time? Is it okay if I keep asking a few more questions? Or are you kind of getting a little worn out from these questions? Or is there a better way for me to send these over to you? Do you want me to email them to you? So all of my communication, I try to give people tons of options of how to interact with me. Because there's another thing too, like you really have no idea what's going on with people in their life ever at work. And so all the things that like all the years where I was younger and I thought, oh, did they like me? They are not even thinking about me. They were never thinking about me. They probably still are not thinking about me today. And people have like a lot going on in life and they have their own way of experiencing conversations. Like even when I think about the very first few times I worked with people who are on the spectrum, I talk a lot and fast. I was overwhelming and I really learned to kind of scale myself back so that they could have room to be part of the conversation and be part of how we worked on things. And I had never had more fun working with a group of people ever than when I started working with people from like dramatically different backgrounds at the standard of what I'm used to. Another group that I worked with were all from the medical field, and all the times that I highlight stuff in yellow or red, they were like, hey, when somebody's colorblind, they don't see that. Find a different way to communicate via email. And I was like, wow, there's like so many different types of human beings in this world, and you never know which one's the one you're talking to. And so you kind of just have to feel ready and flexible to invite that person into the conversation in a way that resonates with them.
Hmm. That takes a lot of emotional intelligence to do. Because one of the questions that I was having in my head is, how do you know what audience you have? Like what tells you this? What are the signs that you pick up?
Yeah, I think so a number one thing I try really hard, and I know this like was not popular around COVID times, I try really hard to always meet with people on camera if possible. But if they're like really not wanting to get on camera, now I'm really checking in with you, right? Because you don't want to come off camera like, are you doing okay? Are you overstimulated? Are you a little bit worn out? Should we reschedule this call? Should we keep it really short? Because if you don't even want to turn on your camera, there could be a lot going on. Maybe the person is sitting at home crying in their pajamas and they don't want to be on this meeting. So the last thing I want to do is show up like, here's my 45-minute long annual review I had prepared for you, boss. Let's go over it. So I really try to decenter myself and how prepared I am for everything and look for little cues that the other person likely is either not quite on the same page as me as to what we were about to do in this call, or maybe a little worn out with the day. We all are probably in 4 to 5 calls before you speak to the next person. And I just try to stay really cognizant. Like if I were to try and drop myself into everybody else's day, are they working from home today? Do I already know that they have kids and a dog? And who knows what else competing for their attention. And so would they prefer to hang out and talk and like rant, or would they rather get off 5 minutes early and take their dog out? So I just tried really hard to think about everybody else's day in perspective. And that rolls all the way back into I like to ask people about themselves the moment I meet them. So I can start kind of like that mining for who is this person? Can I create a mini profile for them? And how do I kind of save this little profile in my mind so that I can ever so slightly tweak the percentage of me that shows up to talk to them?
Oh, that's amazing. It kind of reminds me of the Larry King thing, like I never learned anything while I was talking. How much of this is learned versus comes natural to you? Like you were born with it.
So when I was very first born, like 5 years old, it was just me and my mom out in this bay. And I think like we had two or three other people who lived around us somewhere like miles away. So I was not wildly exposed to a lot of people when I was very first growing up. And then we moved out to Key West, which was like a really dramatic change. People had to really coach me through how to interact with the other little kids. And I think maybe that's just like I got really early coaching because I was really different than everybody else. I really had no real grounded understanding of religions yet because I hadn't been exposed to them. Because when you live around a population of like four people, not a lot of people are going to church or talking about religions or anything like that. And so the first few times people try to tell me about them, I took it extremely literally. And I thought it was like another version of actual real life. And I didn't understand that it was a religious thing. And so that's when they really started realizing like we've really got to work with Grace and coach her onto understanding when people are saying something that they don't mean, or when people are talking about religion or cultural differences, because I was so underexposed. And so I think in my effort to try really hard to learn all that stuff at a young age, I just developed a natural talent after a lot of coaching of like, all right, that's what this person is talking about when they're saying things. So I tend to have a pretty good like natural pickup to when I'm really out of place in a culture. I usually can float along pretty good and just like I don't make a big scene over when I don't understand something. I just let it I like slip it into a little file and I move on and then I go ask somebody safe later like what did that mean exactly? Um, and but a lot of people tend to just open that stuff right up in that moment. So
You weren't always good at this then in the workplace, though. Like I know you and I, when we talked earlier, you had another experience where you had to learn to not say something after having said it or something like that, right?
yeah, so all of this leads to a really great like I had this amazing male mentor at this last really huge project I had. And I still talk to him to this day all the time, occasionally for like little words of wisdom when he has time and energy for me. But one of the things he used to tell me all the time is, Grace, you have to learn. Where like he had like this one quote he always said, it was like, it's better to learn no lesson than to learn the wrong lesson. And that really stuck with me because, like I said, I tend to learn lessons quickly, implement them fast. And so if I'm learning the wrong lesson, I am now immediately replicating the wrong way to fix it over and over again at a very fast pace. And so he really kind of helped me see that my natural interest in other people. So I would go into their office and I would talk to like anybody and everybody for just a few quick little minutes just to get to know everyone in the building because it was a brand new building. And I talked to the receptionist, I talked to the maintenance guy, I talked to the like shipping loading dock guy, the whole AP team, the whole IT team. I mean, I'd been upstairs, downstairs, I'd gone all over the building and I met just about everybody. And almost everybody was like, oh, that's Grace. Hey, Grace. And so I was really excited meeting tons of new people, learning about all these jobs at this company. And we were getting ready to implement a really big software system that was going to impact a dramatic amount of teams. And somehow the amount of stuff I had learned about all of these people, occasionally I would say things that would suggest that I shared something that I was not supposed to share because I knew something that the person had told me that I wasn't necessarily supposed to know. Not like I was divulging their personal secrets, but maybe I was suggesting that I knew that they did not like something about the project, but they didn't want to be identified as the person who did not like that thing about the project. And so I wasn't finding a way to share all this stuff that I learned from all these people I spoke to in a way that was cloaked enough and private enough. And so I was kind of putting people's feelings on blast by accident. And I did not mean to do that. And because I had spoken to so many people through the whole building, all of the executives really wanted to listen to everything I said. So I had really kind of put a huge magnifying light on myself and like beamed out all this information to everybody thinking I'm being so helpful. But there was a handful of times where, like I said, I suggested that a certain part of the system may not be functioning well enough for that person to be able to do their work. But that person was really just one person. And I was just assuming in my head there had to be like 10 people doing that job, right? There was not. There was just that one guy, and that one guy, everybody knew that he had complained to me. And I was like, oh, I'm really like, I didn't want to do that to him, right? Like the last thing in the world I want to do is hurt other people. And so I felt really bad about that. And that's when that guy came and sat me down. He was like, I'm not saying you can't go talk to people. Please keep going and talking to people and collecting everything. But when you sit down and you collect all that information, think about how you're sharing it back with everyone. And maybe even just run through your plans of what you plan on sharing with me or maybe one other safe audience person to prepare to make sure we're not about to expose something we shouldn't be exposing.
Not an easy lesson to learn.
It was hard. I actually did cry like a lot. I cried hysterically for like 4 hours because, and it was really embarrassing because it was in front of an executive of a really big company. And I told him, like, I can't even believe I'm doing this right now. I'm really sorry. And he was like, first person to cry hysterically in front of me and apologize for it. And I was like, no, I had felt like I had hurt somebody. I had felt like I had failed the program and like I couldn't trust myself. And how could anybody trust me now? And now, like, everything is bad and it's total, just fire me, shut it down. Like, I'll go work somewhere. Like, I'll go do something else with I'll change my whole career. Just get me out of here. Like, I like really panicked.
Wow.
And he was like, there's no need. There's no need. And that's where he was like, you're learning the wrong lesson.
I get it. Oh, that's good. That's interesting. I think one of the things that I take away from that experience that you just shared is that we have to think or play it out in our head a little bit. Every kind of action that we take. Like what could possibly come back to me, or I guess to the project or whatever, if I do this or if I do that. How far ahead now do you think? Do you have that mechanism, and do you use it?
Yeah, so now instead of trying to think ahead, because for a while I did try the thinking ahead. It was a 2 year long project, and I can't explain how hard it is to think ahead for that. Like, right, I'm still talking to like 300 people in the building. I'm still trying to manage like a multi-million dollar budget for years. And I was like, whew, I've wear myself. I finally found out how to work for 8 hours a day. I was beyond worn out. And what I realized is not everything matters. And that took me a very long time because when I was younger in my career, anytime I found out new information, especially in small startups, it was pivotal that I share it right away. Like everybody needed to know everything, and we always wanted to document things. But as I evolved in my career, I realized whatever was going on back then, people were just, they knew that I wasn't experienced. And they told me, like, yeah, just share whatever, just ship it out to us. Because not only was I not experienced, but I probably wasn't figuring out anything revolutionary, really, to be honest. But as you get more experienced and you get deeper into things, you potentially are finding out things that are uh, a lot more sensitive. And you should not just be shouting it from the rooftops instantly. And I realized for a while, not everything I'm figuring out matters, especially as I hone my emotional intelligence. Like the other day, I know when I was talking to this person I work with that they were upset enough that for sure they were thinking about quitting the job. They didn't say it, but all the signs were there. I don't need to go immediately run and tell their boss to be like, hey, you should help them out, check in on them, make sure they're okay. I just need to make sure that I really constrain everybody who interacts with that person for the rest of the week to communicate well, to not over ask them for things, like create a really guarded environment for that person without going and immediately telling their boss, like, hey, I think they're quitting and they're going to leave and it's done. Like, because I'm not actually able to fortune tell, right? Like, I can fortune tell enough that I can, well, none of it's fortune telling. I can perceive and anticipate a fairly accurate level of detail, but there's always the regular old human element. It could go in any direction, and I'm probably wrong. And in the off chance that I'm right, I can still create like a safe level of guard around that thing without directly exposing everything within it. And I also sometimes can just let it go. Because if that person does quit, so what? You know? Maybe they found a better job. Maybe it's what works out better for them. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because they were mad. And so you can kind of be okay with a lot of things just being exactly as awful as they seem at that moment. Whereas when I was younger, maybe I just didn't have a good emotional regulation. I don't know. When things went bad, I didn't like it. Like if we lost a customer, I was like, no, we're going to go back and get that customer back. And now I'm a little bit more understanding of like, we're not going to win every customer. Try and keep the customers we have. We'll find other ones. Obviously, if there's a bad trend, there's a bad trend. But I've kind of let go of the idea that I have to act on every single thing I observe because I observe a lot from people all day long. I'm a project manager. I
Yeah.
don't need to just broadcast that out or make a horn across the company.
Yeah, it comes back to kind of what you and I talked about in the previous conversation about there's a line that you walk in terms of being bold enough to kind of put things forth without overexposing, and it looks like you've kind of honed the skill since that time, to not cross the line, to know when to expose something and when not to. Can I ask, in this project, did it take place when you had Anniskett Consulting Group?
Yeah.
Did that happen during that time?
Yeah, so I believe my first attempt to go out on my own, like I said, I panicked. And as you can see, like it sounds like I panic a lot throughout my career, but I mean, like that's just life, you know? I think we're all like one scary night's conversation with our friends and family away from panicking through something, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe other people handle things well, but that's how I handled it. And I went back into working regular full time jobs. I was repeatedly unhappy. And then I found the opportunity to partner with that original company that I worked at for 7 years. They had really never grown their partner company, like partner services offerings in the US, and they were really finally looking to back that up. And I had approached a couple people asking, like, hey, do you want to come do this with me? I think it's an amazing opportunity. Like, I used to work there, I know the product really well. We would definitely be able to go out there and do our own implementations that they would work with us on. And everybody told me it was a terrible idea. And they're like, nah, I think it's awful. I don't think that company's going to be around much longer. And I still don't really know where they're at with their growth, but did I did start my own partner services company to that company. And it only took like 3 years from the very first time I tried to start my own company. So I only got like scared and hid away for about 3 years. And then I finally reemerged and was like, we're starting a business. And it was very on a whim. Like I had spoken to somebody about it. They shut me down on it, said it was a bad idea. And I think like 4 days later, I just went on some website and started a business and like built my own website. And I did all of it overnight. And within 3 days, they had a project they didn't have the pipeline for within their team. They didn't have any capacity to take it, and they needed me to take it. It wasn't a dramatically huge project. I think it was like 15 or $20,000, but that's a ton of money for somebody who just started a business. And 3 days later, I had my first project, my first paying customer, and it really just took off like wildfire after that. It was wild.
Just like that.
Yeah. Yeah, just like that. Well, and very similar to everything, I try to stay really flexible, right? So I was a partner services company for a project management software program, and it is a kind of intense, complicated program. Like I have my love for it because I worked there for so long, but it's not the easiest. And what I found was that a lot of my customers, after the implementation, they would want me to stay and manage a few projects for them in the tool so that their project managers can see it can be done and is possible. And so I did do that. And that's when I really expanded my business to, hey, we'll implement the system for you and I can do project management as a service for you. It kind of became like a fractional project manager for companies. And that even got even more crazy. Immediately people, like a lot of people need project managers that are reliable and can just show up and start working. And because I've built so much resilience from all of my hard lessons learned publicly at all my previous jobs, I'm a pretty impenetrable person nowadays. And I could just show up and I'm like, oh, you don't have a system, you don't have any process, whatever, let's get this project started and we'll make it on the way. And people really liked that attitude. So it's been really successful ever since the day it started.
And when did it start?
It started in 2022. Yeah, 3 years old. Oh, it's 2026. It is almost 4 years old.
Okay.
So yeah.
Still going.
Yeah, I still have it. It's mostly dormant at this point because one of my very last contracts that I had was with a company who I absolutely fell in love with. And I guess like my biggest message to all the people out there who are either early or late in their career is like, don't lose faith in finding the right company for you, because never in a million years did I think that I would just randomly happen upon it. But one of my customers, I was working with them for about a 3 month contract, which I normally do closer to like a 1 year contract, but I decided to take a chance. And I loved working with them. And they offered me to come on full time. And I was like, actually, you know what? Let's do this. And I've never enjoyed working somewhere so much, which I didn't think, especially after owning your own business, you think like, oh, how will I ever figure out how to culturally be part of a company again? But it's going really well so far. So yeah.
What's so great about this company that you were willing to, put aside your main business?
Yeah. It's a startup enough, like it's a kind of a startup, a little bit more mature than a startup. So there's a lot of work to be done. I have plenty of work to do for 8 hours a day. It's not a problem at all. It's in the AI space, which obviously is very popular right now, and I wanted to curious me how to go be part of like the new trendy thing out there. So I was excited about that. And they're really in need of some like good old foundations of project management to just be like deeply ingrained in their company. It's not that they don't have them, it's that people forget because they get so wild and anxious about the new incoming problems that happen, especially like with AI getting so much news all the time. And so it's really easy work in the sense that I've been doing that since the day I graduated from college and picked up my love for project management. And so I was like, wow, I get to finally take what I'm passionate about and turn it into somebody's like standard playbook that we just use constant positivity to ingrain in other people. Because as a very positive culture, we're never trying to criticize people or tell people they did something wrong. The goal is always like, love what you did there. What if we did this as well? So they have the option to continue their way of managing their own projects, but then potentially work with how we would like them to work on projects in the future. And so that approach really just hit home with me. I loved the idea that I didn't have to come in and be like this person that said, we're doing it this way. Because that's, as you can tell, it's probably not my style. I'm much more of a like, hey, tell me how your day is going. How are your projects going? That doesn't sound super great. Have you tried this? If they haven't tried it, like, do you want to go through it together? We can work on this new project plan hand in hand, or go do it on your own and we'll check back in a week. And so there's that opportunity for that's the exact culture they have. And I really liked it. And so I've enjoyed it. I don't know if I'll ever go back to my business or not, because for now, I'm actually really enjoying being an employee again. It's kind of like, I'm not the hardest part about running your own business, as much as I made a lot of money and it was a lot of fun and I felt very empowered and very confident in myself for the first time in like most of my career. The hardest part is the encroaching fear at the end of every contract of like, am I going to get another new customer? Will they renew this contract? And then if you don't want them to renew the contract, how do I explain to them that I don't want to renew this contract because maybe I locked in at a kind of too low of a rate that it wasn't really worth it? And I got really tired of all of that after so many years. Like my business was a success and I loved my clients, but it was a lot of overhead to go through contract negotiations all the time.
What was life like then? What is the cost of success in your business in terms?
I think so, yeah, because even though I was making a lot of money, I was working really close to 12 hours a day. And not because my customers asked me to. A lot of my work was deliverable based. And so if I got it done in 4 hours, if I got it done in 12 hours, nobody really cared as long as I got it done. But I had so many customers and so many contracts that the only way to get all of it done was to work nights, weekends. Then I couldn't even really remember why I had wanted to make so much money to begin with. Like, would I be happy with a salary job that like, I get a very substantial, comfortable amount of salary now. And I was not getting that before I started my business. So maybe that's also why. But the amount of money I was able to make with my business, because you're able to stack so many contracts. And as long as everybody's happy, nobody really cares if you're working on it at 2 a.m. versus Saturday. But I was like beyond exhausted and I really had like no idea what was going on in my life anymore. I was constantly traveling. working all the time. And I was like, but what, like what was I trying to achieve? There was no like dream house in my mind. I had no specific financial goal. And so I was making all this money for literally no particular reason at all. And I realized I don't actually care that much about making money. I care much more about, like I said, waking up, going for a 4 mile hike, hanging out with my family, eating like a very modest, regular meal, like having just a normal, regular life and a good job. I actually really like that a lot.
Wow, congratulations on the courage to and the self-awareness and the vulnerability to be able to let go of, especially when you have a business with that kind of success, monetary success. And I love that you said, "Why am I doing this?" It's the best question. Like, how did you arrive at that question?
I think when I was just starting the negotiations for my full-time job, and I was really trying to define how much money do they need to offer me for it to make it worth it to close my business. And when I matched up the numbers, they weren't gonna, there's not gonna be a job or a money offer that was gonna match what my business was providing for me. But then I really peeled it back to thinking about like, but what did they offer me instead? You know, there's a community, like when you're working for yourself with you and your contracts and your clients, like you're always on it by yourself. There's no team backing you up. Like I had employees for a while and they had their contracts and they worked on their customers. But with me and my customers, it's just me, myself, and I with them. And so it's a very direct, very personal feeling relationship where the money they pay you and the contracts they sign for you are a direct reflection of what you're doing as a person. And I kind of noticed that like if I have a full-time job instead that pays a good enough amount of money that I can be comfortable, maybe I don't need that intensity and I can have like a nice gentle community instead of people who are there to have my back when I'm sick. Because every time I got sick or if a flight was delayed or something, I had to find some way to back all that work up. When you work at a company, there's people there backing you up, or say there's some new form that they need you to fill out for cybersecurity. You're filling out all 20 pages of that form by yourself when you run your own business. And so I was like, man, it might be really nice to work with a large village of like-minded people and still get paid to have maybe a half-hour chit chat over a coffee with a coworker about the movies they saw this weekend. Because when I was a consultant, I was not comfortable billing my customers for when I would just have like absent-minded like chats with people. I would never bill for that. So it just I realized that even though I'm getting paid a lot of money, I am sacrificing all of the comforts that I have and being able to relax for a second, be able to have like human to human interactions without feeling like I have to stay guarded. So a lot of that, it's nice to have all of that kind of gone.
You know how many people don't know to do that? To do what you just did? I read a book recently, The Psychology of Money, and I don't know if you've ever read
I
that.
have read that book.
You know,
It's a good book.
oh yeah, yeah. One of the things that resonated with me was like everyone needs to define for themselves like what is enough money. And when you told me about your negotiation at that point, it was very relevant to me because how much is enough? Like I'm making this much on my own, and then you realize that there's all these other factors that are more important to you in life at this point in time, and you realize that the proportion of money that money plays in that life is not as big as you would think. You just need enough, to live the lifestyle that you want. But you'd be surprised how small that is compared to what we always dream or think is the right amount of money. Because it's never enough, right? You're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, and you're always trying to see if you can compete, and the goalpost keeps moving. So I'm really happy for you and for everyone who's going to hear this and watch this, that you can identify what is enough and you can identify what is right for you at this time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the craziest part is that might change in 5 years. Like maybe say 5 years from now, I'm like, you know what? I do need $20 million. I'll just go out there and start a business again and get back at it. But for right now, I am more than happy with my salary. I love going on my hikes. I know that there isn't an amount of money in the world that could bring my family back if something were to happen to them in 10 years. And that would be all I would want. And so if I look back at, if future me looks back at what I'm doing today, I am incredibly happy to just be like walking along a trail with my family, our dog, with some sandwiches we made ourselves. And, I have my health and my activity and my family around me, and I'll do anything for them. But right now, money is not what we need. We need time with each other. And that's something that in 10 years, maybe if they're not all here, money's not going to bring that back. And so I was like, yeah, I don't need that. And then right now, none of us have a need for some extravagant amount of money. And so why leave them to go make all of this money when I can just be at home with them and make a regular amount of money?
I'm going to cut this one up and I'm going to post it. It's so good. It's such a huge lesson that everyone needs to kind of learn, and be reminded. Like we think we know it. It's almost bordering cliche, what's more important than life, but yet we still need to be reminded every so often. It's very tempting to go the other way. So I'm very happy for you, Grace, that you've arrived at this, and thank you for spending the time to share that part of your life for us or with us. As we close this up a little bit, I have two traditions here. One is I ask the guest if someone sees this and is compelled to reach out and ask you more, how can they reach you?
Yeah, my LinkedIn profile is right there. I think all my contact information's on it. So yeah, however they want to get a hold of me, that works. I can share my email address so that people can email it because I remember now very well. Yeah, at some point you had posted a Medium article, and I was like, I'm emailing him. It's like I was already following you on LinkedIn. I was like, that's it. I got to tell him what I think about his writing and that I love it.
Oh, thank you, Grace. That makes me feel really good. The other thing I wanted to ask is what I ask all the other guests is there any overarching piece of advice, given all the experiences you've shared today, that you'd like to offer our audience?
Yeah, I think everybody has to learn their own lessons in their own way over their own amount of time it takes for them to learn. Just don't forget to check in with yourself on that, whether it be keep a journal, write things down, spend some time introspecting. Don't get so fast and busy in life that you forget to say, like, hey, what did I learn this week? So, because it builds up over time. And I think a lot of people taught me these lessons or shared them with me. And maybe I listened, maybe I didn't. And if I had just really tuned into myself, I probably could have learned some of these the easy way instead of the hard way. I don't know. I learned a lot of things the hard way. Save yourself some public humiliation and check in with yourself a little bit more often.
Very sage advice. Thank you very much, Grace. So for everyone out there, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care. Bye, Grace.
Hey, thank you very much for making it this far into the podcast. I really appreciate it. And you know what? We're not new anymore. We've got a couple of seasons under our belt. But I do want to say that we still need your help in trying to grow the audience. So if you can, please comment, please like, please subscribe to whichever platform you are watching this video in. So thank you. Have a good one.